Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this online collaborators chat for the musical project known as Fractures. My name is Frank Horvat. I am the composer of the music on this wonderful project that's been part of my life for years. And this is the third and final chat we're having this evening where the poets that contributed their words to these art songs are having a conversation. And so it's wonderful to have you along with the ride tonight. This is our third and final chat in this series. You can check out all the other ones on YouTube or Facebook, etc. But to have you live tonight is wonderful. So for all of you that are watching on Facebook tonight, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter or X, it's great to have you here. We would invite you to engage with us. If you have questions about what we're going to be talking about tonight, please use the comment, and we would like to bring you into the conversation. And it's just, otherwise, it's a really, really special thing to have you here tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for the evening. First off, I'd like to introduce my partner that made this project happen. This is Meredith Hall. She's an acclaimed Canadian soprano, originally from Newfoundland, now based in Toronto. Meredith, hello.
Hello, Frank. What a delight.
We are back again. This is so exciting.
It is just amazing to me to get to meet the poets one by one and have just a little chance to find out more about each poem and also about the work that they do in general. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can't agree with you enough. It is really special especially because you and I lived with their words for so many months, you know, first through the selection process, me composing, you rehearsing, and performing and recording these songs. So yeah, this is what makes this this forum that we've established a wonderful thing for sure. So without further ado, let's bring in three of the writers of the songs that were featured on the Fractures album. The first of which is Kathleen Burke. Kathleen is a writer, poet, visual artist, community arts worker, and advocate. She is someone that I know as a dear friend for many years when she used to live in Toronto. Now she's based in Northern Ontario. Kathleen, hello.
Hello from the north.
Is it snowy up there?
Yes, it is.
Oh, not a big surprise. Not a big surprise. So it's so wonderful to have you with us, Kathleen.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you.
And up next, we're going to welcome from backstage. We're going to welcome Michelle Donahue. Michelle is a writer, editor, professor, amateur surfer, and lover of all bodies of water. And you are based in Kentucky, Michelle. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you surf in Kentucky?
You know, I actually about a year ago moved to North Carolina, so you can surf on the coast of North Carolina.
That is for sure. That is for sure. That's a great place for surfing, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much for being here, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we have another Michelle with us. Michelle Regalado Dietrich is a politician, activist, farmer, and poet, and she is based in the great state of Michigan, not too far away from us here in Ontario, Canada. Michelle, hello, welcome.
It's so good to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you, Michelle, especially because of the fact that Meredith and I had the privilege of meeting you when the world premiere performance of Fractures happened back in April. So that was, it feels like, doesn't that feel like an eternity ago, Meredith?
It feels more than a year, but it's not.
I think it was only in April.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah.
How the time goes by, I tell you. Well, listen, it's such a pleasure to have you all here with us on this conversation tonight. I think just to get the ball rolling, just any general thoughts about the project. You know, all of us, we've been in touch, talking about this, planning this, discussing this for literally years. So now that it's finally out there, it's been out for a month, the album. What are some of your thoughts? Anybody, go ahead and chime in.
I would like to say that the whole process has resulted in a beautiful, beautiful outcome to be able to experience um, other people's interpretation of my words, of how the musical process. Um, I've always respected musicians because I don't really understand the process. So this is what I'm looking forward to the most tonight is us talking about that process.
That's wonderful. Thank you for suggesting that. That's something that would definitely be nice to explore for sure, especially the transfer, right? Of,
Right,
from the words to the music to the singing, so that's really interesting as well. So
I was so I'm first of all, it was just such a gift to have my words engaged with and taken so seriously and treated with such um, grace and beauty in the creation of this. And I wanted to know, I love this group being here with the other Michelle and with Kathleen, because I was noting um, as I was thinking more deeply about your lyrics today, we start with the other Michelle with like digging down in the earth, and then my poem is more along the surface of the globe, and then Kathleen's is rising. I don't know if that was purposeful, Frank and Meredith, but I thought it worked really, really beautifully. Sort of engaged with all three poems in that order.
Yeah, cool.
I didn't really think of it that way. I think that just worked out that way. It's just how in all of our busy schedules, this was the night that aligned for all of you to join us. So there's some higher power, some higher energy that wanted us, all the three of you, to be together tonight. So that's wonderful.
And I think a lot of the poems have that sense of verticality or flatness of horizontal. So maybe almost any three poems from the album might have worked out that way. I don't know. But I just also wanted to say how much I appreciated the way that you engaged us in the process. You know, I got the musical score. I played it on my piano. I had a broken finger, so I didn't do too well, but I got a real sense of all the way along the way of where things were at and how things were being developed. And so I cried at the world premiere in Toronto. So it was beautiful.
And that's the thing about this project, is that a lot of our collaborators, a lot of you live far away. So Michelle, almost, I think pretty well geographically, you might be the closest. Maybe Wayne Meneke, who's based in Long Island, is a distant second. But this has been a lovely part of this project, that we've been able to really collaborate a lot with people from far and wide, especially in the United States. I think, Kathleen, you're pretty well the only Canadian-based poet that's involved in this project. I think Christine Pennylegion is Canadian. Maybe actually Christine now might live in Canada, but she spent time in the US as well. But yeah, but otherwise everyone is American-based, because obviously this issue is very large in the United States. So I know we'll get into that later. But first, Michelle Donahue, just talk to us a little bit about what is it like to hear your words sung in music, and just in general. Is this your first time you've ever had any of your writings set to music?
Yeah. And I think I just want to echo everything that's already been said. I mean, it's been such a pleasure in the process itself. As someone who's predominantly a writer, I'm so used to just like working alone. And so being able to be kind of in community with other artists and artists in other disciplines has been such a pleasure. And just thinking about what Michelle and Kathleen was saying, and just how long and how connected this process has felt. I was thinking about, like, I've literally lived coast to coast in the US while you were working on this project. I was in Utah when it began. I was in the coast of Oregon at some point. I was in Kentucky, and now I'm on the other coast. and just kind of but it still feels so resonant. And I think when you, and that's what I love about using art in all of its forms to kind of comment on these bigger important issues, because I feel like they just become almost timeless, or music always feels so timeless to me in the best of ways. And so hearing my words set to that as someone who's kind of musically ignorant, certainly a lover of it, but not a producer, just was such a gift.
That's lovely to hear you, because I actually love, I find what all of you do so timeless. I mean, Kathleen, your posts on Facebook with your paintings, you know, I mean, it's just like, you know, it's interesting how we get inspired by what other people do, you know, like I'm a huge visual arts fan. Like that's absolutely one of my go-to all the time. And it's just and especially modern art. So, you know, and it's just something that just resonates within us, that really brings us joy, you know what I mean, and inspires us, I guess, in what we do. So Meredith, you want to add anything to just the general comments about the project so far? Or?
Oh, I'm just such a fan of poets and people who really dig deep, Michelle digging, but who dig deep and express things that that means so much to them, and yet it's craft as well, right? It's those emotions being sort of funneled through and sculpted by the craft that you've obviously all really worked hard at. And it is incredibly rich to even just be the mouthpiece for you, like because I have to really try to imagine that those are my words when I'm singing them. So I end up trying to imagine your world, and you know, maybe I don't actually perfectly intersect with it, but then it becomes something new, just as when Frank composes the music for it. And in every single case, I got the poem first and you know, came to know it, and then I get the music and I go, how the hell did he come up with that? Because it was always wonderful, but it was always something that, a direction that I never could have thought of. And so I guess it's all the places where we intersect and something brand new gets made that's just tremendously exciting, you know, of being a creator of any sort, and making especially something that is meaningful to not just the performer and the composer, but also to the poets, and also to whoever in your lives may have inspired your poem. Because I'm thinking that, you know, nobody works in a vacuum, and it's obvious that all these poems have a person that they may be born from. So it's so human. It's so wonderful.
I always think about our artistic process, like Kathleen and the two Michelles here. Like, you know, I really relate to the three of you because of the fact that, you know, I create something out of nothing. You know, the germ of an idea, and then we make something into it. But there is something interesting that also that all of us can relate to, that we have in common, is that we take what we created, but then we hand it off. So now, as writers, you are now lyricists as well, and by agreeing to be part of this process, you hand that off. And of course, I can relate to that too, because I'm often composing music for other people to perform. So there's something can sometimes be a little bit scary or about that, but most of the time it's quite exhilarating, because it almost like your creation has like a life of its own, or a new life, because it's been passed along to that other person.
Really good analogy.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the real kind of pleasures for me, for, you know, being able to be involved in this project, is, you sometimes feel like you're just shouting into the void. You don't know if anyone's reading your work or perhaps listening to your work. But then to kind of find that community and find folks who are, so generous as to read your work and sing your work and compose for your work is just a really beautiful reminder that you're not shouting into a void. There are people there. You just might not know about them. But so I think that was a really wonderful thing as well.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I often have to remind myself that to overcome my bad self-esteem about, being an artist. That's a really good point. And I do realize that a lot of people are often listening, that I don't realize they're listening. So that's very exciting. So what I thought we would do next is, any of you joining us live on the live stream, you're welcome to chime in with any questions or comments you might have about anything we're discussing. Feel free to share your thoughts. If you've had a chance to listen to the album, tell us what's resonating with you about the album or the issue of fracking in general. We're going to touch upon all of that in this conversation. But for now, I think what we're going to do now is, it would be great to dive deep into each of the works that you contributed to the Fractures project. I know a lot of people, I know I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what inspired you to write this, write the poem or the text that you wrote and that's been included in this project. We're going to also play some little clips of the music, so that's going to be really exciting to hear, and it'll be interesting to hear more of your thoughts about what you heard. Maybe like the idea that, did you expect to hear what you heard? Were you surprised? Were you shocked? That kind of thing. So it's going to be great to touch upon that. So why don't we start with Kathleen? Kathleen, your poem, Phoenix Rising, was featured in this song cycle. And it's actually song number 13. So there's a lot of significance for Meredith and I for this to be the final song because of what it tells about that. But first, tell us what motivated you to compose this work.
Well, I moved to Northern Ontario in the midst of a kind of a breakdown. So I abandoned my entire life and came up here to go forth with my breakdown. And what I noticed here immediately is that the land is quite sacred. It emanates spirituality everywhere. And I've had my dealings with trees. Okay. They're quite special to me. The name of my book is called The Language of Trees, because I've been blessed with being able to have communication with trees, and just being in a place where it was so overwhelmingly magnificent. The trees, the rocks, everything is ancient, and places that have never been touched, I'm sure, by a human. But at the same time, this particular area, as deeply spiritual as it is, has been really harmed by mining. And a lot of people who were here a long time ago, before Elliott Lake was Elliott Lake, or like the Aboriginal community, have really suffered. The land has suffered, and in my own suffering, I felt such deep glimmers of hope, and that the land itself is reclaiming itself and healing itself. And I just felt part of that. And in my own journey, in my own healing, I just wanted to honor that, where so much has been taken from this place, and to give something back to really be in touch with the landscape and that hope and that rebuilding of self, of place, of all the people who have been here and gone, and their stories and their histories. There's just it's so fragile, the human element, but the nature of Elliott Lake in the north um, cannot be um, obliterated. So my poem is about hope and about belonging to the landscape and the stories, and that was deep healing is something we need to honor whenever we can, as a writer, as a poet, any kind of artist. That's why I just love this project, and I saw synchronicity when I was listening to the music tonight and listening to the two Michelle's, their stories, their own history, and how it goes from like such rich, like to be exposed to it in such a meaningful way, and then we have another person who's a teacher and another person who's an activist, and it all just seems to fit together. So that was that's been the biggest surprise for me, how well everything fit together, and um, it became the spirit of what I'm trying to talk about.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kathleen. That's very beautiful, and it so makes sense why now. I don't know what you think, Meredith, but now just hearing all that, what Kathleen had to tell us, it makes perfect sense why this piece had to be the last piece in the whole cycle, right? Even though technically you didn't write it about fracking. It's one of the few poems in the cycle that wasn't written specifically about fracking.
But it's about loss.
Yeah.
And then loss, and then this transcendent chance at a new beginning, which I just thought was amazing.
Million years thought I would be living in Northern Ontario. I've been a city girl my entire life. And to be in this teeny tiny town that's falling apart and surrounded by like rocks, lakes, and trees and trees and more lakes and trees has been transformative for me. And that's inspired every creative endeavor I've had in the last 10 years.
Well, it is such an amazingly, like as you said, a glimmer of hope. It's amazing to have that glimmer, and of course the image of the phoenix rising out of the ashes is the perfect one.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting is that for about 10 years we had a collaborative art show here, and there's a couple, Joni and Jim Lindemood, who do these beautiful sculptures out of wood, mostly birds. And so as a writer, I was partnered with them, and they created this beautiful sculpture out of wood and copper of a phoenix.
Oh wow!
And I wrote from their art.
Wow.
So it's really interesting that it continues to unfold in different art forms. I just find that fascinating.
Cool.
Why don't we just take a moment here and listen to a clip, an excerpt from Phoenix Rising, the song. go. That's Phoenix Rising, sung by Meredith Hall, pianist Bram Goldhammer, and words by Kathleen Burke. And I did a little part too. I wrote the music. So wow, Kathleen, I just I heard that song hundreds, thousands of times, and it still gets me choked up. Wow.
Yeah, me too.
It's the first two notes. The world, that is an interval for the music geeks out there. That's called a minor six, and you can never go wrong to touch the heartstrings with a minor six. So, oh my god. Oh, actually, sorry, no, it's a major six. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm not a very good music educator. I don't even know what notes I did. Yeah, no, it is a major six. So it's just a very uplifting type of interval. And the first line of that song, like I have so many favorite lines of all of this cycle, like, but I've got like, top 5, top 10, like one-liners. The world I knew burned down. That is just heart-wrenching. You know what I mean? But it's also beautiful because of this idea of the rebirth. And maybe Meredith, maybe touch upon quickly, and maybe even Kathleen, you want to talk, or any of you, Michelle's as well, about the idea of fire. This thing we tried when Meredith and I were picking poems. We were thinking a lot about this idea about fire, and most of the thing, of course, it's a negative thing because of the detrimental impact of fracking, but we saw your poem as turning that idea of fire, that sort of leitmotif that connects it all together, and saying, now we can start something new. We can start over. So anybody want to talk about fire, I guess, please do.
I think fire is truly the symbol of creativity, right? We go from that spark and to that passion, the fire within that drives you to create or to fight or to live. So I guess that, to me, that is the fire within, the good fire within humanity, which inspires us, which helps us to nurture things, even ourselves. But we have to, again, like a little flame, we have to guard it. We can't let it go out, and we can't let it burn, flame out. So I think what the incredible fragility and delicacy of your setting, Frank, and I have to say Bram Goldhammer, his touch, the pianist on this, is just, it's just so light, yet the fire is in it somehow. I can't explain it any other way. The sweet fire, the warmth and the radiance of fire is in it. So it's a brilliant composition, Frank. It's the most moving poem, Kathleen. It breaks my heart. I lost a very, very dear friend, and my best friend is his wife, and her world burned down that day, and the poem just came home to me so strong and hard. And then I just felt like that encapsulation, that little egg of hope that was going to hatch and become a phoenix, it would happen for my friend. It would happen for all of us after loss. The loss doesn't go away, but something new can still emerge. So it was just a really important poem for me personally, as well as the perfect poem, the perfect epilogue for this cycle.
Kathleen, I just wanted to say that I really felt like your poem really touched on how dangerous and also beautiful fire is. And, it's the gift of the gods, but we pay a price for it. like Prometheus, the story of Prometheus. It goes all the way back to that. And I also just want to go back to that first line, which is incredible. The iambic pentameter there really comes through in the music. The world I knew burned down. It's just, and yeah, the music and the singing and the meter, it all just goes together so beautifully. And I'm not surprised that that's a line that Frank thinks about a lot.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, this is not the first time I have set Kathleen's words to music. In fact, we have another project coming in the future where I'll be sending hopefully sending one of her other poems. But I've said other works to her, that Meredith has sung some of those other works. Kathleen, for someone who doesn't have any background in music, you certainly have this amazing sense of, like you said, Michelle, so beautifully, this sort of sense of rhythm and pace in your writing. So how do you do that?
Actually, when I found it really interesting to be going through some emotional turmoil and being able to write in real time. And what I do is when it's down on the paper and edited or whatever, I count beats. I say it out loud and I count beats. I don't know anything about music, but I count
Good
beats
for you.
to find some kind of rhythm. Because like I said, I don't know anything about music. To me, it's like another language. It's magical.
Well, now everything makes sense, because now I understand. See, that's why it's great we're having this session, because I would have never, I didn't know so detailed your process. So now it explains why. So hopefully many more of your works will be set to music. So thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing. Let's talk to Michelle Donahue. Michelle, your work included in this song cycle is called Digging. And Michelle, a lot of people might find it interesting that you don't really consider yourself first and foremost a poet. You're more of a writer, author per se, as opposed to specifically poetry. So please talk about what motivated you to write Digging.
Well, thank you, Frank. I'm afraid I don't know how eloquent I'm going to be after Kathleen's beautiful explanation. I'm just thinking about fire and that opening line, and also the oceans you have in your poem, Kathleen. I just have to read one more line that's one of my favorites from your poems. The sorrows that salt great oceans and seas. Oh, I'm just thinking about fire and water. I don't care about my own work anymore. It's just so beautiful. Thank you for that. But to think a little bit more about digging, I'll attempt to answer this question. I'm predominantly not a poet. I'm mostly a fiction writer. I dabble in nonfiction and poetry. I've been told by a poet that I write fiction like a poet, which was like the biggest compliment I could ever receive, I think, from a poet. And I think what she meant was, like, I'm very interested in sound and rhythm. So even as I'm crafting a narrative, and you have to think about character and desire and, plot, all those things that you don't necessarily have to think about as much in poetry. I always love sound. And I also have no training in music. I wish I did. I love it. But I think I do have a real sense of like rhythm and sonic connotation and denotation. And that's why I find poetry kind of so refreshing. It does feel like magic, as I think Frank and Kathleen was kind of talking about. It does kind of feel like an incantation. And I always think of Margaret Atwood has a poem called Spelling, and she seems like an appropriate person to mention, given how many Canadians we have here. But it's really sort of, it's a beautiful poem. I'm sure you can read it online. But it's kind of comparing the act of like spelling out words to incantations, to the making of spells, of magic. And I always think of writing that way. And I just love the idea of magic. But I think poetry especially feels that way. So do songs and lyrics. And I always struggle to talk about my process with poetry because I don't really have one. Not like I kind of feel my way through. I have kind of a glimmer of something I want to talk about, like with digging. One of my first memories, at least of the outside, was just I loved like digging through sand and dirt and like potting flowers with my father. And there was a moment where, and I described this in the poem, where I like had been digging like a little something shovel like. And there were all these earthworms, and there was one that had severed, and it was just, still squirming, but clearly going to die. And just, I remembered like my little kid heart just being like, I did that. And I think there's something tremendous and awful about our own power and our powerlessness sometimes. That was just something I wanted to capture, and kind of the responsibility we have with that power, and how if we don't use it responsibly, either through malice or just ignorance or childhood naivete, there can be real dire consequences. And I think that's, the way that kind of mapped onto the way we use our environment and abuse it, I thought kind of resonated with me. And to bring it back to the idea of fire, I mean, fire works that way too, right? It's tremendously powerful. It can be used for good. It can cleanse, it can disinfect. Many species of trees need fire to pollinate or repopulate, but it's incredibly destructive too. So if it's misused, that power can be, tremendously destructive. To try to bring that full circle there. So yeah, that's a little bit about my process and kind of just the manic way I think about language and poetry and image.
Right. Meredith, when we first read this poem, right, we knew that this had to be in here because of that idea of the parallel between, childlike innocence, like digging your hands into the dirt, and then how, that symbolism that as humans we have like so much power. We think we don't, but we do,
Well, I also found that like that concept of, the opening, which is so kind of mesmerizing, like watching a child at play, which is mesmerizing, right? They're mesmerized and you're just mesmerized watching them be so in their world, their kingdom, their little kingdom of dirt and plants, whatever it is that they're playing with, toys sometimes. And then it's the kind of grotesqueness of suddenly that baby is enormous and the toys are these huge machines that are ravaging the earth, and somehow it's like something went askew in the process because the wisdom didn't grow with the child enough. It grew enough for us to be clever and able, but not enough to see beyond are the repercussions of our actions. And to see also, because I don't think I'd really ever thought, you sometimes think of scientists who are involved in oil work, and there's a tremendous, I think people often go into these things for the right reasons. They're drawn to what we can do. How can we do it better? How can we do it efficiently? How do we get more for less? But somewhere along the way, some disconnect has gotten, as if it's kind of like a child transposed onto a giant landscape somehow. So I felt like that in the poem was just huge. And then Frank writes this almost intense rock ballad to me as a classical singer who never gets to sing rock music and who isn't really suited to rock music, but who loves it. I absolutely loved this way that Frank just tapped deeper and deeper into this power of not just in terms of volume, but in terms of pressure. I felt the pressure really building in that, that hopefully you feel reflected the cadence of and the crescendo that was within your poetry. It seemed to get very emotional, very big, and that was a challenge, but it was also like so exceptional to have that variety within the cycle. For me, I know my forte is miniatures, and it's always frightening to go full opera, even if it's full rock opera. But it was just extremely correct for the poetry, and I really I got so much out of it. So thank you both. I thought what happened between the music and the poem was an exceptional kind of vision.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, the first time I heard the song, I felt like, it far transcended my vision for it in terms of power and kind of the journey, because there is that kind of crescendo towards the end, but there's still that kind of like edge to it that I was hoping to have in the poem itself, kind of the sad, sinister, but hopefully not hopeless. I try not to write hopeless. This one is a little darker, perhaps, but I thought that the music brought certainly that melancholy, but also like more of a journey to it than you see on the page, certainly so much more. And I thought that was so fitting and so in line with what I was hoping for this poem, but just even more than I could ever do alone.
Yeah, but Michelle, I'm a little curious. When you wrote it, you didn't think like this gradual building of intensity, like this intensity you start from the innocence and that kind of thing? Because the moment I read it, I didn't compose anything, and I already heard the whole song in my head. It was like you constructed it for me, basically.
Wow.
Like that, the gradual build. Like, so I'm curious, were you consciously aware of that when you wrote it, or did that just sort of happen by accident almost?
I mean, I think you sort of like intuitively feel it, and
Right.
in editing, you sort of try to start. You have to like be like, "What am I doing?" And that's where the craft comes in for me. And I certainly think like I in poetry, you often think you need a turn, or it needs to go somewhere, right? It can't just kind of stay on the same level, stay monotonous. I mean, I was thinking about that, and I think language-wise, and maybe the third to last stanza, when it says like now a pump jack drilling rig, like the language gets really consonant heavy, really kind of it changes in tone, and that's where I was sort of seeing that transition. But it just feels like I was shouting in a whisper, and then in the song you really made it. I love thinking about it as a rock opera, right? You were like yelling in this like classical rock opera, which I could never do that on the page. All right, maybe someone more skilled than I could. But I couldn't. So yeah, it was just remarkable to see it transformed in the song.
Well, that's so cool. That's so cool. Why don't we listen to a clip here of Digging, track 3 from Fractures.
I learned and uncovered what was beneath. Now our explorations have expanded. Dinosaur bones, decayed prehistoric plants, turned thick black and settled deep.
and then all hell was going to break loose after that. So that was the third stanza from Michelle's poem, and that was sort of halfway through the build we were describing there. So anybody watching this, you'll have to go at your favorite streaming platform to listen to the full song. By the way, I just want to do a quick shout out to this book. Michelle Donahue, this look familiar? Tell us about tell us about this book, if you can.
Yeah, so it's an anthology all about fracking, and it's a variety of genres, right? Editors Stephanie Brooktrout and Taylor Bjorby are the editors there, and I think it's Ice Cube Press that published it. Yeah, and I actually had the honor of, I know both of the editors. I was in the same MFA program in Iowa with them. I had graduated and moved on when they were creating this anthology, but I just knew it was so in line with my own environmental interests, and I'm always trying to tackle environmental themes. But it's a really incredible anthology with some of my favorite writers. Like I've long admired like Alison Hawthorne Deming and so many others. So it was an honor to be in something with all those writers too.
And basically, we would not have collaborated on this if it wasn't for this book. So many thanks to Taylor and Stephanie for the amazing book. It's because of this book, the vast majority of the poems or texts that were used in Fractures were sourced from this book. So that's great. And Alison Hawthorne Deming joined us on our second chat with this. So thank you so much, Taylor and Stephanie, because if I didn't discover this book, I don't even know if this Fractures project would have happened. So it's wonderful. Michelle Regalagado Dietrich, you are not featured in this book. Neither are you, Kathleen. It just happens our chat this evening involved writers that were not, but your poem in this cycle is extremely important. When Meredith and I were researching, and we went through a vast amount of writing to come up with the perfect set of poems that would tell a story. Like I said, the vast majority came from this book, but we did feel like in the story that we thought Fractures should tell as a song cycle, we felt things were missing. So Meredith, you could tell the story. You went online and?
I went online for weeks. I read any poetry that had ever been written about anything to do with oil of any sort. and most I felt like most of the poems that had anything to do with the environment and the feeling of global warming and I can't remember how I found yours, Michelle, but when I did, it was a moment of complete recognition. It was myself on the page. You were expressing things. Okay, I wasn't in Kalamazoo. I didn't see the Kalamazoo shimmer. I didn't see some of the exact fields that you mentioned, but I had the experience. It resonated with me from the beginning. That when I sweat, because it's warmer than it should be, and I'm menopausal, and I'm having but it's not a hot flash when I sweat, and it's not a hot flash, and it's something that's out of place. And then of course my daughter is now 14. How old is yours now?
Early 20s.
Early 20s. And, I just cried. It just cried because it was the truth. It's such a beautiful poem, a strangely beautiful poem. You find beauty in all of these things that are unnatural. And that's the big reveal at the end is that all these somehow lovely images are a veneer on top of everything that we are culpable for. So that's how at least I read it, and it came home to me because we had more than our share of picnics with paper plates and plastic cups when the kids were really little, and I was racing from here to there. And yeah, I didn't bring a heavy, big picnic basket full of all my china to the park. And you do carry a lot of guilt, I think, as a mom, because it's right in front of you. You're guilty if you don't do all the fun, special things, but you're guilty in how you do them, and the plastic toys and the huge amounts of stuff that it's so easy, the easy buys. And there's stuff that you can't make it not happen. You can only try to do better. So that's your poem gave me the heart of the cycle for me. Like I could be utterly myself singing that poem, because I could I could paint it from my own reality. So thank you so much for that poem.
I feel a little overwhelmed. That's so beautiful and generous, and the whole process and this song cycle is, yeah, as I said before, such a gift. I was thinking about how this poem came about, and I actually, like you, Michelle, I was mostly a fiction writer, and then a series of things happened in the early 2010s that were, spanned from the global to the regional to the local to the very personal. And I really turned to poetry. So some of the images in the poem, 2011, the Fukushima nuclear disaster struck, and that's where you get the iodine skies and uranium raining down on the earth, and the one of the largest inland oil spill in U.S. history was the 2010 tar sands or bitumen spill on a river that's not that very far from me, contaminated over 40 miles of the Kalamazoo River, and the cleanup continued for almost a decade. It's never been fixed, really. And then my husband and I had, to prevent completely unnecessary development, we'd spent our entire retirement savings on the farm that's contiguous to our house, 80 acres. And then we learned, although our farm wasn't contaminated, but farmland not that far from us in mid-Michigan had been contaminated by dioxin that Dow Chemical had spread there. And then, and climate change was continuing, and Michigan is kind of fracking central. Not that there's much fracking actually happens here, but the pipelines come from the fracking fields of Appalachia. They cross here and go to the export terminals in Sarnia, then go through the Great Lakes. So I just, fiction didn't feel the right place, the right genre, the right way to express and deal with what I was encountering. And also I felt that I needed to get involved politically. So it was when I started becoming, I think I put in my little description, environmental and social justice organizer. So I started actually getting organizing against the pipelines that were crossing Michigan. And I wrote this poem, and something happened in parallel with all of this. I wrote a different poem about it, but was that a neighbor's lawn care company sprayed pellets of toxic weed killer all over my huge organic garden. So when I say personal, I really mean it. The poem is a sonnet, and so it's a love poem. And I love that you talked, Meredith, about celebrating both the weird beauty, but also mourning, because that's what I was trying to do. It's a sonnet to the world and to my daughter, to the land. It occurs in a broken Eden, in an orchard. And so that I just found it, there's so many things I could say about, like, the music that you wrote, Frank, and the way that you sang it, Meredith. But I just want to talk about the very last line, because it's a sonnet, but it's a fractured sonnet, just like the world is fractured. That final 14th line breaks in the middle, and the last clause is off by itself. And the instrumentation goes away, and it's the voice that sings, that we left you there, meaning addressed to the daughter, that after we did all this to the world, we left her there. And the voice is beautiful and lonely and unaccompanied, just like that child now grown up at the end of the poem who is left there. Anyway, I could say a lot more, but I'm so glad to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing your thoughts on this work, because it really resonates with us. I mean, I think one of the things that Meredith and I talked a lot about when we started the whole project was we didn't want like all the songs to be extremely in your face. I think a lot of stuff we talk about with the environmental movement is really about our relationship with each other. Like, a lot of the poems explore moral dilemmas, ethical dilemmas, feeling like you have no other choice to support your family. And so your poem that sort of fits into the spirit of that, of why we felt it was so important, other than the beautiful writing, was because it really does this beautiful encapsulation about the relationship of an older generation with a younger generation, right? And the responsibility of that. And I think, Meredith, we even talked about that we needed to have a poem that addressed that. You know what I mean? And it was just like, and we were holding out that this has to be addressed, and we couldn't find. This was like the perfect representation of that, with such beautiful verse. So let's take a moment now, and we'll just take a quick listen to a clip from For My Daughter.
When I sweat in the Midwest January and wish to God it was a hot flash, but no, it's greenhouse gases. Uranium seas rained on by iodine skies, Sunday drives.
There we go. And then we would see the Kalamazoo shimmer after that. That is For My Daughter, track 9 from Fractures. Just to close off tonight's session, it'd be really nice to hear from all of you, because we're all busy doing various things in our daily lives, and obviously we're all present on this forum this evening because the one thing that ties us together, other than being fellow creative artists, is the fact that we're passionate about the environment. And I find that I get so absorbed sometime in my everyday, that it's somehow easy to lose track of the big picture of the trying to get to the journey and the path of the world we want to live in. So how are you all feeling these days? Optimistic, pessimistic about how things are going? I know that might be a loaded question, and you can take that in any direction you want, but feel free, anyone, just to talk about that, how you're feeling about the way our relationship with this natural world and protecting it, how that's going.
Well, to say quickly, I think optimism is the only way forward. I try to always remain hopeful, and there's a lot to be hopeful about. There's a lot not to be as well. And but I think we're getting smarter, and I hope kinder every day. And I still think there's time, and there's been a lot of small victories, and I think, we need to celebrate those and, cherish the world and its beauty when we can, and hope that it will continue to be beautiful, which I think it will.
Well said.
That's lovely. I think as artists, it's built into us. It's ingrained somewhere, that optimism. Otherwise, I mean, I feel it's my obligation to myself primarily, but at the same time, that glimmer is always there no matter what. I mean, it's a gift to be able to be an artist, I believe. It's, there's lots of sacrifice. The gift itself is cause for optimism. And this generation that's coming up behind us seem to have a better handle on on the environmental causes. I would like to believe. Well, one has to remain positive Um, otherwise, what's the point? I feel it's a gift to be um, creative in any aspect of life, and how can one be creative without that glimmer? So
Well said, Kathleen. Yeah, I echo both you and what Michelle says. You know, like what other choice do we have? And I know for me, I think this is what motivates me to do what I do creatively. You know, because it feels like, am I, you know, I think we are talking about that earlier about that artistic bad self-esteem. Am I actually helping the world by what I'm doing? But like you said, Kathleen, first and foremost, you're helping yourself, right? Like you're part of this, our humankind, you know, trying to push things forward. You know, like one of the lines in the song say. I mean, Michelle Regalado Dietrich, you're actually on the front lines. You know, you do so much activist work and political work. Is it easy for you sometimes to feel like there's no hope, or do you never give up?
Never give up.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two truths. One is that, well, this discussion is actually happening at an amazing time. This is the beginning of the final day of COP28 in Dubai, which is the United Nations annual 2-week meeting on climate. And significant progress has been made there on methane emissions and in financial assistance to frontline global south countries to help them prepare for the climate crisis. But at the same time, emissions are increasing, and we haven't gotten the agreement out of that meeting to, we haven't gotten the commitments from the countries that are the biggest contributors that will reduce those emissions. So it's very, very concerning. So we can have both truths, that there's things to be optimistic about and there's things to be very, very concerned about. And the political environment, especially in the US, may well get very much more challenging next November, which is a scary thought on this and so many other issues. But so I don't sleep a lot at night. People who know me are used to getting 3 a.m. emails. I will bring everything I've got, and I want to emphasize how important the work that all of us here are doing in the arts. I'm in groups with leaders of big environmental groups. They are reading and listening and being inspired by your work, and they really value it. And it helps them. It helps them. So thank you.
That's so great to know. Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think we're making these steps, and I love what you also said, Kathleen, about the young people. I think we're all of a certain age here, but I think throughout history, we've always learned that we rely on the younger generation to make the world a better place. So not to say that I'm trying to pass the buck or anything, but I think, yeah, if we can help them along, or maybe anything that we're doing might inspire them for the future or that kind of thing, that could be great, as well. And I know just in my music world, or our music world, Meredith, I wish more people would do projects like what we do. I've been talking a lot about that lately with interviews. I mean, I'm actually, sometimes I'm a little bit wondering why there's not more of people doing what we're doing. So I hope Meredith, what we've done, hopefully that motivates others, right?
Well, actually, my son, who's 17, has just been involved in an arts mentorship project with an eco artist in High Park here in Toronto. And so it was amazing for him. And as part of his contribution to the project, he actually wrote a poem which talks about the cycles of life and rot. Underneath the rot, the life that is strong, the small things that continue to live on through the hard times. So I think that's kind of wonderful. I feel like people like you guys And Michelle, not only through your poetic work, but through the incredible work you're doing as a politician, which is the hardest stuff that I can imagine. Um, you are informing the younger people. If they don't know what's going on, if they're ignorant, they haven't got a chance. And so the educational work that people are doing, and the internet is out there, and if enough of them, if there's a groundswell, they can just turn to their devices and find out everything, as long as they have a clue where to look or what to look for. And so I feel like, I guess we're leaving those signposts as clearly as we can. And the world is so in flux. I mean, I actually thought that maybe fracking would be a problem of the past, and then Ukraine happened, and I realized no, so many things can just turn on a dime, and the economic powers that have their own nations to feed and their own interests to serve are so huge. So this work will probably never be 100% done, but unless the alien overlords come. but I feel like we do. It's just as you said, you have to be positive, and you said, Michelle and Kathleen, you have to be positive. Despair just can't get us anywhere. So unless we're just working away, maybe we'll be ready when the new big discovery happens that makes our lives easier to achieve good results without damage. But we have to keep working like that, and hoping and working, and just, as you guys are doing, put one foot in front of the other and keep creating and trying. So I'm in awe of you all, and just so glad to have been able to be a small part of this project.
Well, that's, what, Meredith, this is a special, for sure. This is a special chat because you and I have been working on this project for years. We've done these chats the last few weeks since the album came out a month ago. And now it sort of feels like, that's it. You know what I mean? So what you just said there is the perfect thing for us to keep going, right? We have to keep going. We have to keep doing what we do. We never lose hope. And if anybody is, listens to this point in the thing and is just takes any one thing out of this conversation, is that art can move mountains. That's actually something my mother always tells me. So I'm sure she's watching right now. If she's watching, Mom, that one is for you. So she often says love can move mountains. So she always talks about my relationship with my partner Lisa that way, how Lisa and I move mountains. But art is the same thing, right? We can move mountains and move hearts and minds and shape spirits. And if anything, our little project has done that, and the work that all of you have done has done that. So I can't thank you enough, all of you, for joining us tonight. Meredith, what a journey this has been for you and I, So any final thoughts, Meredith, about what we've accomplished here?
Well, just that you never know when you put something out into the universe, it's the whole of humanity. It's because it's everything that made you is touching and embracing all the things that made each of your poems, and the people that made them, and the experiences, and all of these things are woven together, and that takes on a life of its own. And we're lucky with all this digital stuff. Maybe it'll be around, who knows how far in the future. And I certainly know I've been tremendously inspired by music that's centuries old, by poems that are centuries old. It's kind of interesting to think that this will be a time capsule of a sort and could tell future generations something about how we strive and hope and try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, on that note, that's a great way to end this conversation. So I can't thank all of you enough. Kathleen Burke, Michelle Donahue, Michelle Regalado Dietrich, anybody watching out there, please Google and look all of these people up. They are doing magnificent, wide array of work. Their contribution to the Fractures Project is just a teeny tiny microscopic amount of the amazingness that they're putting out into the world. So thank you, the three of you, for joining Meredith and I tonight. Really appreciate it from the bottom of our heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you. So nice to meet you, Kathleen and Michelle.
You too, Michelle and Michelle.